In this lesson, we are going to be working on percents. Our first warm-up is to review proportions. So remember when we did a proportion, we're looking for the missing number, and a proportion is two equal ratios. So what we could do is use the horizontal method and know that I am multiplying on the top. 3 times 3 is 9, so we'll also multiply by 3 on the bottom. So 4 times 3 would be 12. In the next example, we want to take a look at what's happening. We have 9 over 12. The first thing I would probably do is to reduce this fraction by 3. So 9/12 when divided by 3 would actually equal 3/4. Then we could use our horizontal method and know that 3 times 2 is 6. So we would multiply by 2 and x would be equal to 8. In the next example, we can use our vertical method. And so remember that we're multiplying 5 times 2 to get 10. So we could use our vertical method and multiply by 2 to get 8. So x would equal 8. All right, the word percent means out of 100. So if we were going to shade 50% of this grid has been divided into 100 squares. And so we want to shade 50% of that. So we would be shading 50 out of 100 squares. In the next example, we want to do 25%, so we want to shade 25 out of 100 squares. So we have 10, 20, and we want to do 5 more. That's 25%. 98% means we are shading 98 out of 100 squares. So we will leave those two open, and we know that we're going to shade everything else except for 2 of the squares, because we are shading 98 out of the 100 squares. We can see that a number can be named in different ways. This fraction and this decimal mean the same thing. 1/4 is exactly the same as 0.25. And 0.25 is exactly the same as 25%. In order to get a decimal to be a percent, we move the decimal 2 places to the right. And then we also need to add the percent sign. So when we are working with our decimals, we're talking about percents, which are the same thing as decimals or fractions. 25%, 50%, 75%, and 100%. Think of the battery life on your phone, which many of us use now. Again, to change a decimal to a percent, we have to move the decimal 2 places to the right. For a percent to go to a decimal, we go backwards and we move the decimal 2 places to the left. So let's convert. Looks like we spelled that wrong. So convert between decimals and percents. This is a decimal. We want to make it a percent. So we move the decimal 2 places to the right and we add the percent sign. This is a percent, and we want to move it to a decimal. So erase the percent sign, the decimal's at the very end, and we're going to move it backwards to the left 2 places. This is a decimal. We want to make it a percent, so we move the decimal 2 places to the right, and we need that extra spot, so we have to hold it with a 0, and we're going to add the percent sign. To make the percent a decimal, we erase the percent sign, the decimal's at the end, we move it backwards 2 places, we put a 0 to hold that decimal place and the place that's empty. Decimal to a percent, 2 places to the right, hold the 0 in the place that's empty and add the percent sign. For a decimal to be a percent, we go backwards to the left 2 places. We use a decimal to hold that empty spot. So the percent formula is taking a part over a whole, and that equals the percent over 100. So it's very similar to the proportions that we already did. So if we want to figure out what the percent is, we can say 5 times what number is 100, and we would multiply by 20. So we're going to multiply by 20 on the top, and that's going to give us 60%. 25 times 4 is 100, and 4 times 4 would be 16%. 10 times 10 is 100, so 6 times 10 would be 60%. 50 times 2 is 100, and 2 times 25 would be 50%. In the next section, we're going to be converting decimals, fractions, and percents to one another. So let's start with the first one. Changing this to a decimal, we remove the percent sign and we move the decimal 2 places to the left. So that's going to be 0.25. 0.25, we know that it ends in the hundredths place, so it's 25 over 100, or we know that that's what a percent means, and that can be reduced to 1/4. 3/10 is written as 0.3 for 3/10, and so when we want to convert that to a percent, we move the decimal 2 places to the right, and that's going to be 30%. Changing the decimal to a fraction would be 15 over 100, and remember, percent is out of 100, so that's going to be 15%, but we want to reduce that fraction so we can divide the top and the bottom by 5, and we get 3 over 20. Now we'd like you to do some student practice problems, which is solving these percent problems and working on this percent table.